Hey, Bobby Manning here, Noa Dalzell. After the Celtics season ends in the second round to the Knicks in blowout fashion, they trailed by as many as 41 points in this game. Not too much to say about the game. No one showed up. Nothing went right for them in this game. And
pretty much a nightmare scenario. I really can't think of a worse confluence of things. At least nobody got hurt, honestly.
Yeah, right.
That's the one silver lining here.
Unimaginable result here. And that's that. We'll put that aside. Let's look back at the season. And we had warning signs throughout that this might not go exactly how we thought it would, where you run the whole team back. Feels like they're inevitable to at least reach the finals. But a lot of bumps, a lot of shooting lows, and then late in the year, a ton of injuries. Drew, Brown, Tatum, certainly biggest amongst them. And you can go all the way down the line on this roster. Numerous guys didn't look like themselves for different stretches here. But still, you got to win this series after leading by 20 in the first two games and through 5 games leading for, I'd say, at least 75% of the minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you go back to the series, obviously they lose 4 games, right? That's how it works. But games 1 and 2, and in particular game 2, because to have it happen once is one thing. To have it happen again in your same arena, in the exact same fashion, is something else.
You had 3 losses in this series where your win probability hit 90%.
Yeah, so to me, the series was lost in game 2 for the most part. And then obviously it wasn't over then. I didn't feel good about it then, but you regain confidence at various spots and you start to feel better about things. But Game 2 was really a turning point because you should have tied things up there. You were up by 20 again, such a deja vu, and you blew it. And so that's why they lost the series ultimately. It was an inability to execute in the clutch 3 times, Game 4 as well. And it was an inability to be a front runner for a stretch. And New York is very comfortable playing from behind. They're very comfortable trailing a little bit. And I think that was the kind of the micro part of what went wrong here, and then on the larger scale, you didn't have Kristaps Porzingis really. You didn't have any semblance of who he was during the regular season. You had a more limited version of Jaylen Brown than I think he would like to admit, but there was various moments and plays where you just realize this is just not the same guy from an explosiveness standpoint, and so your margin of error got really slim, and you didn't execute, and so that's kind of what happened here.
They gave themselves no margin for error by losing those first 2 games. You probably could have survived 1 loss, but even in Game 4, you're up 14 at one point in the second half there. They just couldn't manage leads in the series, and it was pretty shocking to see. And what I felt by the end of this is they looked human. They looked like any other team that could lose to a team in a series, that could have struggles, have collapses. For so much of the last year and change, this looked like an invincible unit that could become a dynasty. And that's the real disappointment here, is that this roster, when you looked at it and what they brought back this year and what they could have potentially brought back next year if things went the right way here, they had a chance to become a dynasty. And unfortunately now, I think it's all but certain they're just going to be like the Nuggets, the Bucks, some of those recent champions, the Raptors, who won a championship and then went back to being with the rest of the league.
Yeah, listen, the NBA right now is not a dynasty league, right? It's a league of parity. It's a league that is, and all the structures are in place to prevent teams from becoming dynasties, and that's part of why they're in a tough predicament this summer with the second apron. But at the same time, I wouldn't close the door on this era. I think I've seen a lot of eulogies of this group. I've seen a lot of, what this chapter's closed. This group will never be together again.
You heard some of it in their comments too, though.
No, I mean, I think there's an understanding that it's not going to be the same exact roster. It's almost never the same exact roster, and that's why every NBA season when it ends, you look around that locker room and you recognize we will never be together again. This was like an incredibly unusual situation where pretty much everybody, with the exception of 2 players, returned from last year's roster, right? And so they didn't have that moment last year. But normally, even if you win the championship, you have this feeling of like, this group's never going to be together again. So whether they blow this thing up and you lose 6 guys or you lose 2 or this is an unrecognizable group, we have no idea right now. I don't think the players that even have gotten there emotionally, the guys that were asked about it today were not even ready to kind of think about it. But at the end of the day, you have Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown, and I will continue to maintain that if you have those 2 guys, and I do believe that Jayson Tatum is going to come back from this Achilles injury and still be a great player, you are always going to be in the mix because you have a great organization, you have a great general manager that's found ways to put talent around you. And ultimately, this is a team that's been a perennial Eastern Conference Finals team for years now. And so this was a down year. This was a very disappointing finish. You're not going to deny it. The injuries, whatever else you want to kind of pinpoint here. But I don't think this is the end of this era whatsoever.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a reset, and there will be changes. There will be new players. I think there'll be fun elements to next year. But there'll also be frustration coming down to earth from that invincibility a little bit. They're going to be one of numerous playoff teams in the East, I feel like, instead of one of those teams you pencil in right at the top. And again, for so much of this year, it felt inevitable. They were going to get through the East. They were probably going to have an edge in the finals because of their shooting, because of their depth, because of the star power they had. I always felt like any opponent they played was going to have to really put things together to beat them. And I know the injuries and the deterioration of the health on this roster, specifically Porzingis, completely crumbled their chances of advancing far in this playoffs. But you're also balancing that against the fact that they were in control for large portions of this series. It's tough to balance those two things.
Yeah, and here's what I'll say. I think a lot of people will say, this team should have been a finals team. This team should have been an Eastern Conference Finals team. It's felt inevitable, like you said. This is just the reality of the NBA right now. You think the Cleveland Cavaliers, with the dominant regular season that they had, thought that they were going to be a second-round exit to 5 games, right? The Oklahoma City Thunder faced elimination in a Game 7. They might not make it out of the second round after having the most dominant net rating season in NBA history, right?
And Thunder
we
not
are
making the
we are in an
conference
era right
finals.
now where the regular season is just no longer a great indicator of what's going to happen in the playoffs. It makes playoff basketball more exciting. It's why people have locked into this postseason and all the upsets and all the uncertainty and all the crazy finishes. And so last year felt pretty inevitable to me because there just weren't teams that were able to put together real challenges to the
And
Celtics.
they rolled through that season.
But at the same time, last year wasn't inevitable because Jaylen Brown doesn't make that corner 3. Who knows? The Pacers take a 1-0 lead. Now you're overcompensating. Now you come in game 2. Anything could have happened, right? And so what I asked Joe about post-game is, did it feel like maybe you just didn't make the winning plays from the previous year? And it's not what the fans want to hear, right? The fans want to hear that there was somebody to blame or it's, somebody at fault. I think it comes down to they just weren't able to replicate those winning plays. And the Pacers, for example, they've been down by 7, 2 or 3 games this postseason with a minute to spare. What does that mean, right? That means that you were not in a position to win that game, and you somehow found a way to win. And to win a championship, and especially to win multiple championships, you have to have those moments. They just didn't have those this year. And so sometimes that's not the answer that's going to make people feel satisfied, but I do kind of put it at that too.
And then the exclamation point at the end, the wrong kind of one, the Tatum injury. And that puts even more, I hate to use the word, but despair over how the season ended, because now the fallout of this year is going to carry right over to next season, where you're not going to have him. Even when he starts to approach a return, you're wondering how he's going to look when he comes back. It's just such a long-running story that's going to keep going and going and going for a while here when you consider that kind of injury. I felt good about Jaylen Brown's ability to lead them through that. Tonight was a difficult reminder that you do have to show up and play consistently every night in that position. And I like the aggressiveness early, but it fell apart for him pretty quickly after that.
Yeah, Jaylen had a tough one here. And what I'll say, I think Jaylen Brown is one of many guys on this team that, it's easy to ride the highs and lows. And certainly, I gave him a ton of praise for how he performed in Game 5. And in the same way, he just didn't have it tonight, especially as far as taking care of the ball, which has been such a point of emphasis for this team. And he just didn't do that. Jaylen Brown's a proven player, right? I've said it a million times, but he's a Finals MVP. He's a multiple 4-time All-Star. I think the questions around his abilities to lead and to be a top scoring option for this team, shouldn't waver because of this performance. He could have had a great game today and it wouldn't have mattered because nobody else showed up. And even early on when he did kind of have it going, you could tell that, it kind of pushed him to force the issue a little bit because nobody else had it. So again, I think Jaylen's going to surprise a lot of people next year. And tonight's performance doesn't change that for me.
We'll hear more from the Celtics tomorrow. Exit interviews take place back in Boston, but that's it for the season. Unbelievably, we're done in mid-May when it felt like we'd be going through June here again. And it makes that 2024 title feel all the more important here, certainly. I think that's the most obvious thing you look at. Thank God, in many ways, they got it done, you're saying, if you're a fan now, because there's certainly some uncertainty ahead here for them. And we're going to start to preview that tomorrow. Drafts coming up, free agency in July. There's so much to cover here, so stay tuned with us here on CLNS Media and Celtics All Access. So thrilled to have Noa Dalzell alongside this year. So happy to be working alongside her this year. Thanks to Amit on the road here with us as well through the whole journey while covering all these other sports as well. It was a real joy, as always. Year 5 for me, year 2 for Noah.
Year 5.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this was a great year of coverage, I think. And we appreciate all of you for watching. Appreciate you, Bobby, for having me on the show.
Thank you.
But I think, there's going to be an interesting offseason. I think last offseason was kind of just basking in the glory of the championship and not a lot more to talk about than that. And this is certainly going to be a much more eventful one.
Yeah, you said it. You didn't see a Game 6 until now, and this is quite a first.
Yeah, I want to see a better Game 6. This was not a good first Game 6 for me as a reporter, so hopefully we'll have a better one in the future.
All right, that's it for us here in New York City at Madison Square Garden. Knicks beat the Celtics, advanced to the Eastern Conference Finals against the Pacers. Celtics heading home.